Animate here. So I'm going to do a top 10 quirks from my hero that aren't possibly the best for being a hero. Now this is my opinion, and there might be a little bit of spoilers, so, beware. It was really hard to choose because every quirk has its uses, so it's hard to think of which ones would not be very good as a hero. So, number 10. Gigantification that you see Mount Lady use. Gigantification allows Mount Lady to drastically increase her size to gigantic levels. While gigantified, she can easily subdue smaller targets and fight similarly sized foes on equal footing. The extra mass also grants her enough strength to destroy buildings and other structures with ease. Now, why is it on my list? Well, for one, because she gets so big, she's only helpful in certain situations. And two, if she relies on it, for the most part, then how is she going to be able to get into those tight, cramped spaces to help save people and stuff? So, yes, it does grant her power and everything, but it also has a little bit of a drawback because she can't get into the smaller, tighter spaces to perhaps save somebody. Number 9. Eraser that you see Shota Aizawa use. When Eraser is activated, Shota is able to disable a person's quirk factor, for as long as he concentrates on his target, rendering any quirk affected unusable. He only needs one part of the target's body to be within his sights for it to be effective. Since most people in the world rely on quirks for combat purposes, this makes him an extremely bothersome opponent to deal with. The only thing about this quirk is it has a limit of how long it can remain active, and with repeated use of the quirk, it shortens its maximum duration. Whenever Shota's quirk gets deactivated, his hair falls down to its original position, which an observant enemy will be able to see.
I found your tell. It's your hair. When it drops, it means you've stopped using your quirk. You're having to blink more often.
It does not affect appendages originating from mutant-type quirks, but it can impair their function as the quirk factor that incorporates all the mechanisms necessary for a quirk to work properly when temporarily nullified. And he needs to focus specifically on the target and not blink. Once he blinks, then they're not erased anymore, and they can get him with their quirk. So it's got some really big drawbacks, and it's not a power quirk, so in order to use it, he has to be able to fight on his own without, relying on a quirk. So that's why I don't think this one would be one of the best quirks to be a hero, so that's why it's number 9. Number 8. Blood Curdle that you see the hero killer Stain use. Blood Curdle allows him to temporarily paralyze an opponent by ingesting samples of their blood. He only requires his tongue to make contact with a small amount of a person's blood, regardless of where and how it's found. For example, coagulated bloodstains on a curative. Once the user gains access to his target's blood, they can activate Blood Curdle and immobilize their target for a limited period of time, leaving them vulnerable to a finishing move. The weaknesses are the amount of time that the victim does remain paralyzed. It does rely on their blood type. In his case, blood type B represents the longest amount of time, then AB, then A, and finally O has the shortest amount of time. They can vary widely, so he has a very, very high chance of not knowing how long they're going to be paralyzed for, so it's a very bad, I guess, quirk to use if you really wanted to. Because as a hero, you wouldn't want to use a quirk like that, because that seems kind of, scary for people. Plus, because of the drawbacks, who knows when that person's going to get back up and attack. So it has some pretty bad drawbacks. That's why it's number 8. Number 7. Meatball used by Seiji Shishikura.
Meatball! He can reshape flesh by massaging it. For someone else's body, he can only knead it and make it a ball, but his own flesh is more versatile. For example, he can cut it off, manipulate it, or make controllable objects. It's as handy as it is horrifying. No way!
Meatball grants him the ability to manipulate raw human flesh, and manipulate his own flesh, giving him the ability to separate his limbs and control them at will. Flesh can be expanded and molded together for offensive and defensive maneuvers. It can be levitated and used as projectiles to capture targets. Anyone captured by a ball of flesh can be kneaded and rolled into a meatball, rendering them immobile and disfigured. People who have been turned into balls of flesh still maintain their senses. He must maintain focus to keep their targets restricted, and this hold can be released if the user takes enough physical damage. So it does have some backlash because if he's not, keeping focus, then they will come out of it and will attack. And then I don't think that, people, if they're in trouble, would really like seeing a hero use this kind of quirk just because it's a little nasty in my opinion. It does have some good powers, but it's kind of like Blood Curdle,
Nasty
where
finger things? Just
it's
float back to
not
him?
what you
He's
would
the
want
type
to
who reacts in
see a hero have. That's why I decided to put it on my list. Number 6. Popoff, that Minoru Mineta uses.
I've got these sticky balls. Their strength varies. Depending on how I'm feeling, they might stick to something a whole day. They grow back as fast as I can pull them off, but I'll bleed if I use too many. Oh, and they don't stick to me. I just bounce right off them.
Popoff allows him to produce extremely sticky, removable spheres from his head. Once he removes one of his spheres, a new one will grow in its place almost instantly. These spheres appear to be made entirely of his hair, with him referring to them as such. The spheres will glue themselves to any surface once they get in contact with one, and are extremely difficult to take off, seeing that any limbs or objects will just get stuck to it as well. He is the sole exception to this, as his spheres act like bouncy objects when he touches them. Water does not seem to affect the adhesion capabilities of the spheres. The weaknesses are the stickiness of the spheres corresponds to his health. Um, and it lasts the whole day if he's in good condition. If he removes too many spheres, his head can bleed, which, is not fun. So it does have some really good uses, but it's not necessarily the best in the instance where if you want to save somebody. He doesn't have a power like, say, Ochako's, where you could float stuff away or float somebody to safety or anything. And seeing his head bleed when he uses a lot would be a little scary to somebody who is in a traumatizing situation. So I don't believe that it would be the best for somebody to use if they were in a, situation where they're a hero and they had to fight. Plus, it's not the strongest for, fighting a bad guy. So that's why I put it on my list. That's just, what I think. Number 5. Solid air used by Kosei Subaraba. Now, solid air allows him to solidify air to form a wall or platform through his breath. They do not fall to the ground once solidified, and will stay afloat in midair even when another person clings onto it. They're soundproof this fall, making it effective against quirks that rely on sound, like any voice or brainwashing. The size of the air barrier depends on his lung capacity. The barriers are breakable. Bakugo was one to break them, as you saw, and by the time of the joint training arc, he has improved his quirk, making his barriers much more resilient. And one thing I do not like about it is, just because it is just barriers. Whereas it is powerful and there is quite a few uses you can use. Number 4. Telepath that you see Shino Sosaki use, or as her hero name is, Mandala. Now, a telepath grants her the ability to communicate with anyone through thought. She can instruct and send messages to multiple people at once. The range of her abilities is unknown, but it was enough to reach everyone inside the Beast Forest at once. It is the only a one-way communication, so its user cannot hear their target's thoughts or receive responses. When she is fighting against an enemy, she can use her telepath to send messages directly to their foe's mind, with the intention of distracting them. This throws them off, causing them to lower their guard against the attack. Now, I don't think this would be a very good quirk in the sense of really fighting, because yeah, you can use it to, fight them off. But it's not gonna be helpful unless you have trained and you know how to fight yourself without relying too heavily on it. Um, and it's not like a flashy quirk or anything, so it's not one that you would think a hero would really have. That would be very helpful. Whereas hers is helpful because she can communicate with other people and let them know. But because it's only one way, how is she supposed to know if they're doing what she says or anything? So that's why I don't think it's the best quirk that could be used in a hero situation. Number 3. tail that Mashiro Ojiro uses. Now, tail is exactly what it sounds like. An appendage that extends from his lower posterior, so a tail. It's very bulky, being longer and wider than any of his regular limbs. And its tip contains a tuft of blonde hair, just like his hair that he has on his head. It effectively functions as a third limb. It's strong enough to break objects made of metal, capture enemies, and support his own weight. Um, and one thing that is a weakness is it's susceptible to damage and makes it difficult for him to lie down or sit. So, it's not the best thing to see if you're in a traumatizing situation and you want a hero to come save you. Um, I do think it's a pretty cool quirk, though, but like I said, it pretty much is just a tail, so there's a certain limit to what he can do with it because he can't shoot long range attacks or anything. He could possibly wrap something up in his tail and maybe like fling that at the opponents, but there's only so much he can do with it. So I don't think it's as good as certain quirks that are out there that could be used in heroic situations. Number 2. Naval Laser that Yuga Ayama uses.
His quirk, Naval Laser! That's right, a belly button laser! But he can't shoot it forever.
Naval Laser gives him the ability to fire sparkly laser beams from his navel. Those beams specifically come from his belly button. They can range from short to long range, with strong enough recoil to propel the user through the air at a high speed. He has the ability to manipulate the size and shape of a beam, such as turning it razor thin or into a blade of light that can be swung around. The beams are powerful enough to destroy metal and pierce through solid concrete, though they do not appear to be lethal. It is bright enough to illuminate dark areas, a valuable skill in rescue missions, or work as a beacon, allowing others to easily locate him. For scattered allies, this is extremely helpful for regrouping, and for enemies, it serves as effective bait. The one really big downside of Naval Laser, though, is he he has trouble shooting it continuously. It can damage his insides if he uses it for more than a second. And if he uses it too much, he loses control of his bowels. So, this is not the best situation to be in if you're in a really bad situation, because he can only use it for a certain amount of time, so it's not the most helpful in, say, a long drawn out fight. So that's why it's at number 2, because it's not, a quirk that you can use all the time. And number 1, attraction of small objects that you see Deku's mom, Inko Midoriya, use. This quirk grants her the ability to telekinetically attract small objects to her. The exact size limit of what she can attract is unknown, but she is able to pull an action figure towards her from the ground, or anywhere, with multiple hand movements, so you know that it's a gravity aspect of her quirk and not instant telekinesis. So this one, I believe, is not very good in heroic situations because, like I said, we don't know the size or anything about the limits to it, so we don't know if she can maybe pull rocks away from people or anything. So it's not the best in the ability where all she can do is pull things towards her. So that's not very helpful in the fact that she can't pull a person towards her, she can't pull something off of a person like Ochako's quirk or anything. So it's not very helpful, and it's not helpful in a fight because can't really fight with that quirk. It can pull maybe a knife or something towards you, but if the villain you're fighting has a super powerful quirk, you're not going to do very well hand to hand with just a knife. So I put it at number 1 because there doesn't seem to be too many uses that you can use as a hero if you just pull small objects towards you. So that's why it's number 1. Hope you liked it. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Thank you.